With us in our studio for the next hour is Steve Welch. He's running for the U.S. Senate as a Republican. Steve, why are you running for the U.S. Senate?
Well, I'll tell you, I started my first company when I was 23, which is about 12 years ago, with hardly a cent to my name. Over about a decade, bootstrapped that business, grew it into a global business. And I'll tell you now, I help entrepreneurs. I help young people get businesses up and off the ground in a firm called Dream Adventures in Philadelphia, where we literally help people take an idea on a napkin and get it up and going off the ground. And I'll tell you, something has drastically changed in this country just in the last 12 years since the time I started my first company. If you ever get a chance, Corinne, I'll encourage you to go out and talk to somebody that started a business from scratch. It's always an interesting story. It's usually 100-hour weeks for years at a time. It's physically, it's emotionally exhausting. And under the best of circumstances, it's daunting. And we now have a government that has become so repressive, it has taken that difficult process, that entrepreneurial process of getting businesses off the ground and making it darn near impossible. And as the father of 3 young children, I can't sit around and watch us really destroy this economy while at the same time piling mountains of debt on every man, woman, and child in this country. I think the root cause, the problem in Washington today is we have too few people that have actually done anything. You have, the career politicians that have run for office time and time again, but don't really have the frame of reference, don't have the experience of what it's like, or how the jobs are created, how companies make the tough decisions. And I think that's desperately needed in Washington, and I think I bring that unique experience, and that's why I'm running for office.
Welcome to the PCN Call-In program. I'm Corinna Wilson. For the next hour, Steve Welch will answer your questions about his campaign for U.S. Senate. Call us at 1-877-PA6-5001, or you can reach out to us on Facebook or Twitter. Well, I see our phone lines are starting to light up a little, but I do want to ask one question before we get going with calls. You talk about being an entrepreneur, yet one could argue that the U.S. Senate or either body of Congress is a place that's not particularly entrepreneurial. It's old and established, and you can go on from there. Why would an entrepreneur want to be a legislator?
Well, I'll tell you, if Washington was working, I would gladly stay home and continue to build businesses. I mean, I love what I do, but I think that you hit the problem. It's old. It's stagnant. It is time to send a new generation of leader to Washington. Let's look what's happened over the last decade. We've seen a massive explosion in the size and scope of government, and I think it's going to take people like myself and others. I'm not arrogant to believe that one individual is going to do it. It's going to take a huge number of people to get involved and make sure we win elections across this country, to make sure we send a new type of person to Washington, one that's there not as a career politician, somebody that's going down there as a service. I think that our founding fathers did not envision this idea of somebody going down there for 30 years and continuing to build their own empire. I think what works is the citizen legislator, and that's why I'm running. The first day I entered this race, I actually signed the term limit pledge. I'm a huge proponent of term limits. I think it's what's needed to keep that constant churn of ideas and fresh perspective in Washington. And I think that's if you want to look at some of the structural things that are needed in Washington, that's one of them. I think you also need to start banning lobbyists, senators and congressmen from being lobbyists for life. Going to Washington should be a privilege, not a road to riches the way it's become. So yes, there are problems now. I think the only way we're going to change that is to send new people to Washington. They're going to fight to restore and return decision-making to our states and our communities and our families.
Very good. Let's go to the phones. CJ in Harrisburg, welcome to PCN.
Hi, I wanted to ask Steve, how does his entrepreneurial background prepare him to be our United States Senator, and how does he think it will help him better serve Pennsylvanians?
Great question. I think I think an entrepreneur by nature is a problem solver. My background is actually engineering, and I think that's kind of the perspective that's needed. Somebody that can lay out here's what we need to do, here's where we are, here's where we need to go, and lay out a plan of action for getting from point A to point B. I also tell you, entrepreneurs, we often start with having very little information and being able to execute in a very complex world. And I think that's really what we need is people down there that can think through what are becoming very complex and difficult problems. And I think my background of solving problems in the marketplace is very applicable to solving problems in Washington. And again, I think that if you don't realize this, there's actually not a single engineer in the entire United States Senate. So we have a lot of lawyers down there, nothing wrong with that, but I think it's time for some diversity and a different set of skills in Washington.
Engineers are known to be trained to prioritize problems, start with the small and work to the big.
Absolutely.
where do you start your first day on the job as a U.S. Senator?
I think you start with this basic premise. We are still the most innovative society the world has ever seen. And I read literally 1,000 business plans a year. So I assure you there's absolutely no shortage of ideas in this country. We're still the most productive. I've been on manufacturing plants on almost every continent. There's no question we're more productive than the rest of the world. We're harder working than the rest of the world. With that said, you have to ask yourself, why are jobs leaving this country? I mean, that's a really important question if you believe the base premise. And I think the reason is we have a government that is pricing us out of the global marketplace. So I think day one is to make sure that we focus on an agenda that makes America competitive again. That starts with throwing away the tax code and starting over again. Next, putting a balanced budget amendment that's capped as a percentage of GDP. It's time to return to common sense regulations, and it's time to make sure that we have an energy policy that allows us to harness the resources that are underneath our own feet. You do those four things, you will see this economy roar. I have no doubt America, again, is still more competitive than the rest of the world. We simply have a government over the last several decades that is making us less and less competitive in that global market.
All right, let's go back to the phones. Maury in Murraysville, welcome.
Hello, Steve.
Hi, Murray.
Unemployment is still at 8.3%. What policies can you support that would lower unemployment and create long-term economic growth?
That's a great question. I think that is the question of the day for somebody we're electing for the United States Senate. I also think it's important to note that unemployment's really not at 8.3%. It's really at 15%. If you look at what's called the U.S, which is people that should be or could be employed right now, that number's running at 15%. So I think that shows you how much trouble the economy really is in. I think the number one priority, as we laid out, there are four things there that I laid out a second ago on how to make America more competitive. I would start, though, with throwing away the tax code. The tax code right now is literally taller than my 5-year-old daughter. It is very complex, and in so many ways, it is picking winners and losers in the marketplace. When you see GE paying basically 0% taxes, and not to pick on GE, but it's because they have teams of lobbyists that have enabled them to work the system to their advantage. But when you see every small business owner in the marketplace probably paying 35% or something very close, you realize there's something wrong, there's something broken in the system. So the problem with the tax system is it's picking winners and losers. It's also, there's so many of the resources that go to paying taxes are not productive. I mean, if you think about it, when you're figuring out your taxes, there's no value creation from that. It's purely value manipulation. It's figuring out what you owe to the government. You're not creating a product or service that somebody needs. And by having this incredibly complex tax code, we're making every American company, every American family less productive because they're figuring out and spending all these resources on figuring out what they owe. If you had a simplified tax code system similar to what's working in Singapore, what's working in Taiwan, you would see America be able to use those resources to grow the economy. What's interesting is I thought when we first came out with this plan, I was concerned that the accountants were going to be very upset, thinking this was going to be a bad thing for them. But when you talk to accountants that have been in practice 30 years, they'll tell you they used to spend their time and resources helping companies become more efficient, helping processes within the company becoming more efficient. And today, so much of their time is spent on fixing or determining what is owed from a tax standpoint. And again, I think that is making every American company less competitive. And if you threw that away, started over with a simplified system, you would see America be able to reallocate its resources towards making things. It's often missed to increase the standard of living as a country. We have to make things. We have to have products and services that people need. But so much of what's happening is Washington is pulling those resources away from actually being productive to adhering to different government regulations and figuring out what taxes are owed.
All right, we have more questions for Steve tonight. Marion from Wilkes-Barre, you're on the air.
Oh, hi, Steve. Well, my husband and I definitely support the pipeline initiation, ASAP, and would like to know exactly where you stand on this very important issue.
Yeah, I think in general, energy is a critical component that we've ignored for too long. I'll take a step back. My first company, it was a manufacturing company in the biotech industry. These were good jobs in manufacturing, and we have our second biggest cost was energy. And when you have high energy costs, it actually makes every U.S. manufacturer, every U.S. company, whether you're an accounting firm or a manufacturer, it makes you less competitive in the global environment. And the real failure of the last of Casey has been to basically waste this opportunity we have over in the Marcellus Shale and making sure that we can harness the resources that are underneath our own feet. The reason that Keystone pipelines, the Keystone pipeline and other pipelines are so critical to making sure we're competitive as a nation is if we can reduce energy cost here in the United States, we do a handful of things. Number one, we reduce the cost to every manufacturer in the country or every company, and we make those companies more competitive, which means they'll grow, they'll add jobs. But two, we generate jobs from harnessing those resources, building out those pipelines actually creates jobs. And last, we have an enormous trade deficit. A significant portion of that trade deficit is because we're importing oil from OPEC. I would rather see us import, I'd rather see us harness the resources underneath the feet of Pennsylvanians, but I'd also rather see us trade and get the oil from Canada. I think that's the best way to make sure that, number one, we have a safe supply of energy, but also that we make our manufacturers and companies more competitive in a global environment. So I support the pipelines. I think they're a critical element to making sure America is more competitive. And I think the fact that Obama and Casey have really fought against these show that they literally have cowed down to the extreme environmentalists in their party. I mean, if you look at the Keystone Pipeline, this is not some new earth-shattering idea that we've never tried. I mean, we have tens of thousands of miles of pipeline crisscrossing this country. This was just an extension of an existing pipeline that would make us, or allow us, if you will, to get oil from Canada. Because we have pushed this off for the last 3 years, it is likely that oil is going to go to China. I mean, the Chinese are very aggressive in trying to secure their energy supply, and they would love to have the Canadian tar sands. So I think I think if we look out at some of the failures of Obama and Casey, this would be at the absolute top of the list. And it's not affecting us today. The issue is it's going to affect us down the road because that not having access to that oil long term will drive up prices. And one of the reasons you're seeing prices at the oil or at the pump much higher today is because markets don't always act on where the supply-demand curve is today. They look out and they say, where's it going to be down the road? And as this administration has restricted drilling, as this administration has fought against pipelines, it's ultimately those in the market realize that prices or there's going to be less supply in the future. Therefore, it's pushing price up today. And I think it's a failure of leadership from Casey and Obama.
One quick follow-up, and then our phone lines are lit up. You describe a scenario in which if we import oil from Canada, or if we have a pipeline, or we extract more from our own land, that we can reduce the amount, or that other countries couldn't get it first. Under our current system, with the current laws and our current trade agreements and so forth, is that how it would work, or would that scenario require a legislative change? In other words, can we today say we'll put a pipeline in and we'll keep all that here? Or is it a free market-based thing where it goes to the highest bidder? Yeah,
it's a free market, so it clearly will affect the world supply. However, because you have a pipeline, your transportation cost of that energy is drastically lower to Houston, for example, if you build the Keystone Pipeline. So it's much more likely that you'll have lower costs here in the United States. So, energy is a global market. Clearly, it trades as a global market, but there's also a cost of delivering energy to its location. And that's why building pipelines are so critical to making sure that we reduce energy costs, because it allows us to get energy from point A to point B at a lower price point, which makes America more competitive. It makes us more efficient as a nation.
Very good. Let's go back to the phones. Bob from Philadelphia, you're on the air.
Hi, Steve. I had a question for you. I want you to know if you think the congressmen should be like lobbyists after they finish being congressmen. Thank you.
No, absolutely not. I think part of the reason the system's failed and people are so upset at Washington is we see a system in which people are going to Washington and getting rich. Our founding fathers viewed and had a strong belief in the idea of a citizen legislator, that people would bring their experiences to Washington, they would serve for a short period of time and then go back to whatever career they had. And that has been turned on its head over the last several years. Heritage actually has a number of pieces of data that will show the longer somebody's in Washington, the more they start to think Washington is the solution to the problems. And this is as Republicans or Democrats. It's just kind of a natural, self-selection. The longer you're there, you just view that process or view yourself as more important. It happens in every career of every person in the world. But when it's in Washington, it becomes a bigger problem because they start taking our tax dollars to empower themselves to try to fix the things they think are a problem. So that's why I think it's time to ban lobbyists and ban senators and congressmen for lobbyists for life. I think that, again, it's a privilege to serve. It cannot be this career that it's become. I think it's one of the structural problems that's needed to change things.
Okay, let's take another call. Sandy from Carbon County, welcome.
Thank you. I would like you to please explain UN Agenda 21 and to your constituents, and please tell us what you will do to begin to get Pennsylvania communities out of it.
So Agenda 21 is a UN resolution that is designed to basically have the world police, the UN police the entire world's resources. I will tell you, I think at no point, at any point in time, the United States should never cede its sovereignty to any other organization or any other country. I think Agenda 21 is unacceptable. I think that it will never fly, and as long as I'm a United States Senator, I'll fight against it.
William from Downingtown, you're on the air.
Yes, I'd like to ask Mr. Welch, what is an Eisenhower Fellow, and why is that useful to be a U.S. Senator?
Great. Well, thank you for the question. It's a great question. So I am an Eisenhower Fellow. The fellowship was set up, Dwight Eisenhower, after the end of World War II and after his presidency, he started to believe the best way to world peace was to exchange ideas. He really felt from his own experiences in the military, the more he got to know other people from other cultures, the better they were able to communicate and the more likely they were to find ways to work together as opposed to fight each other. So they established the Eisenhower Fellowships to allow people, originally foreigners, to come to the United States and learn what we were doing here to be effective as a country. And they would make up their own curriculum and study whatever they would choose to study, and then they'd go home and try to apply those best practices. Back in the late 90s, we realized we had a lot to learn from the rest of the world as well. So the Eisenhower Fellowships expanded and started sending American fellows a couple a year around the world to study whatever they'd like. I was fortunate. I was an Eisenhower Fellow in 2009. I think it was 2009, and used my time to study economic development, to really understand how different economies were creating jobs, were creating companies from a couple key aspects. So one, looked at how government policy certainly affected economic development, but two, looked at how funding sources tended to affect economic development, whether it be venture capital funds, pension funds, those types of things, how that money and capital was allocated, how that affected job creation. Three, technology transfer. In the United States, we have a lot of our technology is developed at the university level and then spawn out. Other nations are doing it in other ways. And then last, studied culture, how culture actually affects the likelihood of people to succeed as entrepreneurs or to get businesses up and off the ground. And I think why it's applicable for the United States Senate is I spent a year looking at what was working around the world. Spent time in China, spent time in Singapore, spent time in Taiwan, Hong Kong, trying to understand what their economies were doing right. And I will tell you, in a lot of ways, this is one of the reasons I got so involved in politics. You see, the rest of the world has figured out, well, we did so well for so long, and they're running in that direction. I mean, you look at most of the Asian economies are decentralizing. They're reducing barriers. They're encouraging people to take risks. And you see us doing the complete opposite. You see us moving everything to Washington, kind of a one-size-fits-all approach from Washington, taking away the experimentation of the states. You see us putting up barrier upon barrier, which are making it harder and harder for people to get jobs or get companies up and off the ground, which create jobs. So I think that experience of really going out into the world and understanding what different societies, different countries are doing, and being able to understand best practices, I think is critical to making sure that we're competitive long term. I laid out one example a second ago, which is Singapore has simplified their tax code system to the point it is just makes Singapore companies more competitive because they're spending their resources creating products and services, as opposed to us where we're spending, I think, too many resources and figuring out who owes what taxes. So I think those experiences and having a kind of a worldview of the economy, I think, is critical. I think America economy will thrive in this global economy. We have all the advantages. We simply have a government that has overstepped its bounds and regulation and in so many different ways tying up our entrepreneurs. I think when you look at what's not working in America, we all talk about Obamacare, and Obamacare is a disaster. I think it's bad economic policy. I think it's bad health care policy. But the one that's not getting enough talked, we're not talking about enough, is Dodd-Frank. Dodd-Frank is the financial reform bill that was designed after the financial crisis to eliminate too big to fail. Well, it didn't do that. In fact, I would argue it made more companies that are actually now, they believe, are too big to fail. But the bigger problem I have with Dodd-Frank is we took the regulatory burden of Bank of America and we put it on our small and community banks. The reason that matters is if you take a bank, say you have 50 people, 50 employees, and they have to hire 5 just to adhere to the government regulations. They don't have the cost structure to handle that. So they'll either be gone or they'll sell out to larger banks, which means the banks will get bigger and bigger. Now, the reason that really hurts us as a country, the reason that it is going to starve the lifeblood of this country is my first company, we didn't go to a large bank to borrow our first dollar. We went to a small community bank that nobody's ever heard of called WSFS. And it was that $50,000 line of credit that I was able to open as a 24-year-old that really was what got the business up and off the ground. But we now, through the one signing of the pen of Dodd-Frank, we have taken the structure of that banking structure, and we will have destroyed it in a couple of years, probably 2 to 5 years. That small community bank will be gone, and that will destroy small business in this country. And let's not forget, 75% of new jobs come from small businesses 20 employees or less. Almost every seismic innovation that's happened in our country over the last couple hundred years has come from small businesses. They're the lifeblood of this country. They're more innovative. They're more productive. And we, through one signing of the pen, passed a law that is going to starve the capital that those businesses need to get off the ground. So you talk about all the things that need to get repealed. I think Dodd-Frank is at the absolute top of that list. And I think if we don't repeal it, we will look back 5 years from now and we're going to say that's the bill that destroyed the small business community in this country.
Let's head back to the phones. Chris from Crescent, welcome to PCN.
Hi, it's great to be here. My question for Steve is this. You've said that Senator Casey is failing Pennsylvania and destroying the American dream. What policies is he supporting that are doing that?
Yeah, so the policies are supporting, first of all, he's voted with this president 98% of the time. That is really hard to do. Corinna, I think you're married. I challenge you over the next week to start looking with your spouse, figure out how often you agree or disagree. I suspect it's probably you'll disagree more than 2% of the time. Most independent people, it's hard to find somebody you agree with 98% of the time. I think that the reason that matters is it shows somebody that clearly is not thinking for themselves, somebody that's clearly not fighting for the best interest of Pennsylvania. They're fighting for the best interest of party politics and President Obama. And I think Pennsylvanians deserve better. If you look at the bills he supported that I think have been so devastating to this economy, number one, we talked about Dodd-Frank. He was a proponent of that. I think unless it's repealed, we will look back. That will be a devastating blow to small business in this country, which means it's a blow to the American economy. Two is Obamacare. He supported. He's actually one of the biggest proponents of that bill. Again, we're now starting to see for the first time the effects of that. But in essence, it's a top-down policy of health care policy. The government is going to tell every company in this country and every insurance company what they have to offer, what they can and cannot offer, which is the exact opposite direction we should be going in. What we should be working on is choice within the marketplace. So Casey supported that. He supported the bailouts. He supported cap and trade. Thank goodness it never passed. I mean, the Europeans are now seeing the effects of the cap and trade system, which is making every manufacturer flee from Europe because it is onerous, it's cumbersome on businesses just to even figure out who owes what, and it drives up cost. So if you look at Bob Casey, he's talked repeatedly about trying to drive up the cost of energy without realizing that energy is the input to every business in this country, and if you drive up energy costs, you make American business less competitive. So those are just a handful of the major ones that he has supported that have made, I think, America less competitive in this country or in this global environment. And one of the reasons Mr. Casey needs to go back to Scranton.
And as a quick follow-up before we head back to the phones, you feel so strongly about this that you created a 6-minute internet ad called Separated at Birth, hearkening back to the old Spy magazine Separated at Birth feature, in which you show the president and Senator Casey dressed alike, doing the same thing, eating the same foods, and so forth. Are you concerned at all that that ad undermines your credibility as a candidate in that it's humorous, it's long, and it's more collegiate in nature?
It's designed to be a mockumentary, so you know, I think everybody understands it's not. We don't think they actually were separated at birth. No, I think that this campaign, one of the things we're doing is getting new people involved. We're having fun in this process. It was designed to be respectful in a lot of different ways, but I think it brought up some very valid facts, which is he has voted with this president 98% of the time. We walk through the bills and all the different things they have done that have basically been totally in sync. And I think the people of Pennsylvania need to understand where Bob Casey is on the political spectrum. Because he's basically been an MIA for the last 5 years, there is a question, where does he stand politically? But this is a guy that has had, to give you an idea, frame of reference, he has a 0% Club for Growth rating. He has a 0 heritage rating. that means he is to the left of Nancy Pelosi, Harry Reid, and Shaka Fatah. So I think that making sure that the voters of Pennsylvania understand where Bob Casey is on the political spectrum is incredibly important for them. He is out of line with where we are as a state, and I think we're going to do a lot of fun. Hopefully, you're going to see more entertaining ways we're going to demonstrate where Bob Casey is. And I encourage anybody to go to welchforpa.com and check out that video that was just mentioned. You can see it there, and also please pass it on to friends. We're also using the internet and social media to get new people involved. I think as a party, as a Republican Party, we need to acknowledge we start out 1 million voters down in the state. We need to find new ways to attract voters to the Republican Party, and we're spending a lot of time as a campaign doing that. I think it's critical for us long-term as a party, and because I think it's also critical to us long-term as a country. It is, these policies of big government that have happened over the last decade really have benefited the few. I mean, if you really look what big government is, the natural kind of byproduct of big government is you centralize decision-making in one place. It's those that have access to that decision that benefit at the expense of the rest of us. And that's why you see GE paying 0% taxes. That's why you see the dry cleaner down the street paying more than 0% taxes, because those that have access benefit at the expense of ordinary Americans. And across the political spectrum, people are rightfully upset about that. I think that Americans, we love success. I think that one area that I think President Obama doesn't quite understand about the American experience is that how much we love success. I have never had anybody fault me for my success because they think and they know it's based on merit. We love when somebody develops a new product, a new idea, new services. We love when they succeed. But there is a problem when you have somebody succeeding not based on merit, but based on political connections. And it's a natural byproduct of big government. And Bob Casey, along the entire way, has voted with Obama and his big government agenda. He simply has been a rubber stamp for Barack Obama, and I think Pennsylvanians need to know that.
The natural correlation to the lobbyists having unfair access and so forth would be the recent or not so recent Citizens United case, which now has allowed for these super PACs, money to come in to support candidates, not directly to their campaign, but in advertising and so forth. What's your position on that?
I think it's a good example of how Washington, when you try to create regulations to regulate free speech, you ultimately have unintended consequences, byproducts you could have imagined. The McCain-Feingold was done under the best of intentions. Let's be honest, it's had terrible outcomes, and I think we need to find a better solution to campaign finance reform. I think the money coming into the system is a problem. I'm the first to tell you I think it's corrupted the system, but I also will tell you I don't think anybody's given a real viable option other than making sure that there's transparency there. I think that needs to be there so that people know who's donating and who's supporting what candidates. I think that's critical that transparency be there. But I also think that people should be able to use their resources however they want in society, and the government to telling them how they are and are not allowed to, I think is un-American.
Very good. Let's go back to the phones. Bill in Middletown, welcome.
Yeah, hi. Thanks very much. My question concerns public education. And while we probably need a national strategy for how we educate our citizenry, I'm a little dismayed at the fact that we have a federal Department of Education that seems to muddy the waters in terms of what the states do with their educational policies and so forth. So I just was curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Great question, and my great passion in life is education. My wife and I dedicate a lot of our own time and resources specifically to early childhood education. I think that's where we need to fix it. I will tell you, I think the long-term predictor of how successful we'll be as a nation is our education system, and that's why it's so critical. That's why it's also so upsetting when you see Washington try a one-size-fits-all approach to education. I will tell you, I was No Child Left Behind. At the time, I said this is a terrible bill. I will tell you, I still think it's a terrible bill. It basically took, and it caused a lot of problems. I'll kind of walk you through a handful of them, I think. Number one, it actually took that feeling of local community away from a school. I mean, I will tell you, I went to Unionville High School in Chester County. There was always a sense of feeling the school board was in charge of the school, the community was in charge of the school board, and you had a feeling or draw to that school, a sense of pride within your local community. No Child Left Behind, by having Washington tell school boards across this country that you need to do this, this, and these things to get money, created basically the purse strings from the state to the states, and then from the states to the individual school districts. It took that away. And all of a sudden it's, Washington's in charge of our school, as opposed to our community's in charge of our school. I think that cultural change has been devastating. Beyond that, I think it took away the experimentation of the states. I will tell you, I think the brilliance of America has been how we've used basically states as laboratories. And I don't think that that's more clear anywhere than education. Education, we literally would have thousands of experiments going on across this country in different school systems, and we learn what works, and people tend to move there. We see that, and we learn what doesn't work. People tend to leave there. It's kind of a self-correcting mechanism. But when you have Washington telling everybody how to run their schools, that goes away. You lose that experimentation. And I don't think it's a coincidence, as we've seen Washington take over more control of the school systems and the education system, you've had worse outcomes. I mean, that's undeniable. For the last 20 years, Washington's taken more control over schools. School outcomes have gone down, and I think they're a direct correlation. I will tell you, I think it is a states' rights issue. I think we have an $80 billion a year Department of Education. At the federal level, I think it's time to return that to the states as block grants and phase it out over time. And I would love to see the states try different things. In this state, in Pennsylvania, I would love to see charters and choice and vouchers. I think those are critical elements to making sure that we have a competitive school system and one in which parents are empowered to make sure their kids get the education they want. I'll tell you, one size fits all doesn't work with children. Every child, and again, I spent a lot of time in this space, every child learns differently. And to kind of say, oh, we're going to spend, every child's going to learn in this manner is just a failed system. What I'm encouraged, I will tell you, I think the federal government is gone awry. I think that's failing us. But I will tell you, there's a lot of evidence that the next decade is going to be the decade in which education, we're going to really see a revolution in education. And it's actually going to be driven from the private market. You're seeing so many different consumer-based education products. You're seeing things that are going into homeschooling, things that are going to the charter schools that are really revolutionizing how we educate our youth. Things like game-based learning, things that we're using to capture data on how children are learning to basically figure out the most efficient systems for learning. That's a real opportunity. I mean, data has changed every industry in this country except for two, probably. Government doesn't do much with it, and the education system. I think the next decade we're going to see that change, and we're going to see parents really have an opportunity to make sure their children are educated in the way they see fit, and I think that's a real opportunity.
And as a quick follow-up, and then we'll take a short break, one idea that we see trending, to borrow a term from Twitter, is this idea that money follows the child, or even more broadly stated, we've heard money may follow the citizen, even for Social Security or Medicare or Medicaid, that there may be an amount of money that we allocate to each child in Pennsylvania at state level, or maybe across the country. Do you think that's where we're going? Is that where you would like us to go?
I think as a state, I think that's a good solution. I think, again, you need to push it from Washington down to the states. Let states decide different things. I will tell you, I'm not smart enough to tell you exactly what's going to work in every system, nor is anybody in Washington, and that's why the power of the market, the power of empowering our citizens is more effective than a top-down approach. I do think that having, to use your term, money follow the person, I think the key to that is it empowers the consumer to make choice. And from that choice, the market tends to work. Our healthcare system is probably the best example of where this is not working. We've gone in the complete opposite direction where, we detached the money from choice. So I suspect last time, if you have a health insurance plan, this last time you went to the doctor, you don't even know what it cost. I mean, you gave them your insurance card, you paid your copay. That's a failed model. I mean, that creates no economic incentive for you to get better service for a lower cost. And by having dollars follow the citizen, you empower the citizen to have choice. Ultimately, that empowers the marketplace to function more effectively. And if the marketplace is empowered, it actually raises the standard of living of all Americans. And I think that's why it's so critical that we move decision making from Washington to the states. Let states try different things. From that experimentation, we'll get different ideas that will improve the standard of living of all Americans.
For our callers who are waiting, hopefully you can be patient for just a few minutes. We're going to allow Steve Welch a moment to catch his breath, and we'll tell you a little bit about some upcoming programming. Our look at the candidates for the 4th U.S. Congressional District, the seat being vacated by Congressman Todd Platts, continues tonight as the Republican candidate Mark Swamley joins us on the issues. Find out what issues are important to this candidate coming up next. On tomorrow's PCN call-in program, animal husbandry and sport is our topic. We're joined by Chris Herr, Executive Vice President of Penn Ag Industries Association, and Paul Shapiro, the Senior Director of Farm Animal Protection for the U.S. Humane Society. That's tomorrow night at 7. Tomorrow night on Journalist Roundtable, we discuss the primary election, recent voter identification legislation, and other issues that are in the news. Heather Long of the Patriot News in Harrisburg, Matt Belanger from WGAL-TV 8 in Lancaster, and Tom Barnes of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette are our guests. Journalist Roundtable airs tomorrow night at 8. Want to interact with us online? Like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter for updates on all of your favorite PCN programs. And just a reminder, if you like the programming that you see on PCN, please thank your local cable provider. They carry PCN on their channel lineup as a public service. We receive no state or federal tax dollars. Let's go back to the phones. We have a full slate. Mike from Midland, you're on the air.
Hi, thanks very much for taking my call, Karina. Mr. Welch, thank you as well. I guess the question that I have for you is an ethical question. In recent months, it came to light, I think the average person, an average American on the street didn't know that representatives and senators at the federal level were privy to inside trading information. And, private people aren't allowed that type of information. As an example, Martha Stewart, she went to prison for that. Mm-hmm. And it came to light that at the federal level, our congressmen were privy to that information for personal gain. And my question to you is, what's your position on it? Do you think that the Congress people should be privy to that type of information for personal gain? Or do you think that it's something that should not be allowed?
Yeah, I think it's appalling what's happened. I think the caller hit it dead on, which is Martha Stewart went to jail for something congressmen and senators, it appears, have been doing for years. So I think that it was the Stock Act. I'm not positive I have the name of that right. I think it has passed, which is going to ban that. I would absolutely support that. But I think it goes to demonstrate a culture in Washington where people are going to Washington to get rich as opposed to serve the citizens. And that's why, again, you need things like term limits. You need financial or reform that gets rid of the lobbying in the system, and I think that's the only way you're going to change Washington. I would support banning that process in which senators and congressmen use inside information to trade stocks. I think it's appalling.
You talked earlier in the program about too much regulation and the need to strip some of that away to allow the American entrepreneurial spirit to flourish. Along those lines, when you talk about government regulation, that does include things like the SEC and our regulation of the securities market. How do you balance those two things?
I think the key is the balancing. I think it's a great question and one we need to wrestle with as a society, because I think regulations, there's always going to need to be rules in the system. I mean, nobody is saying that you don't have rules in the system, but we have gone clearly to a point in which the government has just overstepped its bounds in every industry. As I travel the state, what's really amazing is if you're in the agriculture industry, they'll tell you we are the most regulated industry in the country. You go to the energy industry, we are the most regulated industry. I come from the biotech industry. We felt like we were the most regulated industry. And it's just this feeling that over the last couple of years that the Washington has just reached into the marketplace and is telling people what to do and is abandoning the concept of common sense. And I think that they're trying to regulate away failure. I mean, I think that really what you're looking at happening in Washington is you have so many people in Washington that are trying to eliminate failure in the system or eliminate any risk in the system. But that's not the way the world works. Entrepreneurs take risk every day, and you have to take risk often to accomplish good things. So I think it's time to return to a common sense regulation. And I think the way to do that is to send people to Washington that actually understand these businesses from the ground up. And not in a theoretical sense, not because they've been academics, because they've had to make the tough decisions. They understand, what you do, why you add capital to a business, why you make hiring decisions. I think that's the only way you're going to be able to send people down there that are going to break down these regulations that have become so devastating to the economy. I also think it's time that we start any regulation that's passed, there's a sunset to it so that it has to get renewed years down the road. What we're seeing now is just regulation after regulation that, some of which were passed in the 1940s when things were drastically different than they are today, but they're still in the books, and people are still adhering to them. I'd like to see a policy where regulations are, when every regulation's passed, it has to come up for renewal, whether it be 5, 10 years down the road, to force us as a system to go, or as a society to go back and look, was there a cost benefit to this, or was it something that hurt the marketplace? There's a recent study out that came out that In the last year, there's been 137, I think it is, regulations that have passed that have been $100 million or more impact on the economy. Compared to the previous administration, that number was usually in the, I think, 50s and 60s. So you're just seeing, again, it's more of a evidence, that the market or the government is reaching into the marketplace. So I support sunsetting regulations, and I think it's going to take people that understand the industries. They're going to go into Washington. The EPA is a perfect example of an industry, or I should say it's become an industry, but is an organization that's overreached its power and is really restricting energy in this country. And by doing so, it's actually hurting the standard of living of all Americans. I mean, when you see gas at $3.59, that's not just a number on a billboard. That's somebody's paycheck, coming out of somebody's paycheck. I was in Westchester a couple of weeks ago with a kid that just had graduated from college. He was 23, 24, and he had a long commute. He was still living at home, had a long commute. And it was $10 more to him a week to fill up his gas tank than when he started just even 6-9 months ago, I think it was. That's real. That's really hurting his standard of living, and it's because we have fought against energy. We have demonized those that are trying to create energy without our understanding that energy is an input into every American business. Every time you eat a piece of food, it took energy to grow that food. It took energy to move that food to your plate. Every time you get in your car, it took energy not just to move that car, it took huge amounts of energy to actually build that car. And there's just a total disconnect within society of that impact.
Let's head to Lancaster County. John from Strasburg, welcome.
Hi, Steve, this is John from Strasburg. I'm calling I'm a design engineer, and I work in the IT field at a small company. And I know that you're an entrepreneur and you have a history of background in manufacturing. What are you going to do for the small business?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and the question I think is really, people have looked out over the last couple of years, and it's clear that big business and big government embed together. Okay, when you see. Again, I keep going back to GE, and I apologize for the fact we're picking on GE today, but I think it's the most relevant example. When people see GE getting special treatment, when you see Jeffrey Immelt in the president's cabinet or his, I guess it's economic council, and then you see GE getting pretty substantial handouts for their turbines industry, and this is the wind turbines and other things. They're getting special tax breaks. There's a real feeling that the system is no longer favoring or level. Okay, and I will tell you, I don't think we should punish GE. I think we need to make the playing field level, and I think if you do that, you'll see small businesses compete and be competitive. My first company, we did compete against GE, so that's the other reason I pick on GE a lot. And if you think on paper, GE should have had every advantage. I mean, they have a lower cost of capital, they have unlimited resources, they have to pay less in taxes, yet we beat GE every day. And small business in this country beats big business every day. And that's why it's so critical that we have a level playing field, so small businesses are able to be competitive in the marketplace, as opposed to big businesses, which are now using regulations to keep others out of the marketplace. I mean, so many things that big business do often is they like the regulations, because the regulations usually, first of all, they have the economies of scale to handle the regulations, but often those regulations are designed to keep new players out of whatever field that they're in. And I think that part of the reason we're struggling right now as an economy is that the economic growth engine of this country is small business, and for too long over the last couple of years we've tilted the playing field against small businesses, against our entrepreneurs, and that's starting to show in the job creation numbers, which are I'm glad they're getting better, but they're still far from being what they need to be to make sure that we're competitive as a nation and we get this unemployment rate down, the real unemployment rate, which is really 15%. So what I will do, I'm sorry, John, what I will do for business is small business is make sure that you have a level playing field, and I am sure on a level playing field you'll outcompete anybody in the marketplace.
Let's head back to the phones. Arlene from Lehigh County, welcome.
Hi, Steve. First of all, we don't trust our government anymore. I just collected almost 400 signatures to get on the ballot myself. I'm in the 134th Legislative District, and I'm on the ballot because I'm witnessing firsthand the corruption of 2 state agencies. And then, to top that off, the elected officials that are supposed to oversee this not doing their job. So we don't trust the pipeline because we can't trust the government to protect us from environmental disasters like we saw in BP, the fracking in Ohio, if you read recent news about that, the earthquakes, etc., from that. And if we can't even oversee the Pennsylvania Department of Aging and the Civil Service Commission, how can we trust the government with other things?
Well, first of all, I thank you for running. I think it's encouraging. You're seeing. I think the Obama, kind of the legacy of Obama is likely to be that he engaged a new generation of people involved in politics that saw us going so far to the left as a country. They stood up and got involved. Citizens like the lady that just called in. So you're seeing new people that have not been involved, engaged in politics, and I think that's the only way things are going to change. And I think what's encouraging, and one of the reasons I'm so excited about our chances in this race, is we're seeing that new group of people that really got involved. I really wasn't involved in politics until a couple days after the stimulus package was voted on, when it was clear we were going in the wrong direction. Get up involved, and that's why you saw the rise of the great Tea Party movement in 2010. I think that that helped us win. Obviously Pat Toomey and Tom Corbett, and I think we're going to take that same energy with us into the 2012 cycle, and that's why Pennsylvania is going to go red.
Speaking of the Tea Party, new polls out this week from Politics Pennsylvania that say that you are actually, I'm sorry, I can't find my, oh, here they are, that you are running last among your peers in the Republican primary, and that is particularly true among Tea Party voters when you break them down by category. Talk a little bit about that. What do you think it is about your policies or your politics as you articulate them that is not attractive to them? Well,
I think in that same poll, first of all, you saw over 50% of people undecided. I think that's what's really encouraging. You also saw two things jump out on Bob Casey. First of all, less than 50% of people would support him, and he has a 38% approval rating. I mean, that is dismal for a gentleman that has been in public life their entire life. So I think that shows the vulnerability of Bob Casey. I think because you have so many people undecided in this process, and I think unfortunately the presidential election really sucking a lot of oxygen out of the air. I don't think a ton of attention has been paid to the Senate race, and there's evidence to that when you have 50% of the people still undecided. But what we're really encouraged about, several people in this race have spent huge amounts of money. Others have been running for 18 months. Others have run statewide. I'm very new to politics, literally, a couple months into this race, and the fact that we're garnering a lot of support, we're very encouraged by. I think the voters are going to start paying attention to this race, and when they do, I think our message of making sure that America's competitive again, and making sure that we have a level playing field for our small businesses, and making sure that we restore the decision making from Washington, move it back down to the state and our local communities. We're very comfortable. We'll get that message out, and we'll win the primary, and what's going to be a competitive primary. I think what's exciting, again, even in the Pennsylvania primary, you have five very capable individuals that are engaged in this process, several of which have never run for office before, and I think it's an indication that the people of Pennsylvania, our ordinary citizens, are standing up to get involved, which I think is very healthy for democracy.
Now, you did receive the endorsement from the Republican Party in Pennsylvania, and you've received the support of Governor Corbett. What difference does that make to your campaign? It's
a big help. I mean, I think it shows, for those that don't understand that or follow the endorsement process, I think there's 357 state committee people that are elected officials. When we got into this race, and I think it was November, literally set out across the state and meetings, sitting down with those state committee people to introduce ourselves. I got to know them. I believe they got to know me, and the fact that they selected us is one of the reasons I'm so proud of our campaign. I think we showed the ability to sit down one-on-one with people, understand their needs, and be able to articulate why our values matter. And I think that most of the state committee people are serious and understanding we need to grow the party. The only way we're going to get back to a point in Pennsylvania as a Republican Party where we can win statewide is to grow our registration base. And my background, so you know, I've been a lifetime Republican. I will tell you, I worked for Joe Pitt stuffing envelopes when I was 18 years old, but in 2005, I will tell you, I was 28 years old. I was working 100-hour weeks trying to build my business, and I was frustrated. I looked at a Washington that had we had controlled the White House, we controlled the Senate, we had controlled the House of Representatives, and I think we blew up the size of government. We continued to move decision making to Washington, and Pennsylvania, because of that, we lost hundreds of thousands of voters across the state because we didn't govern as a party consistent with our principles. I was one of them. Now I became frustrated, left left the party. In hindsight, it was clearly a mistake. If I had it to do over again, I would have fought to change the party from within. But I will tell you, I came back a couple days after the stimulus package was voted on, dedicated to making sure we changed this party. This party never abandoned its core conservative principles again. Got involved, actually worked for Tom Corbett in the primary, took 6 weeks off of my job and worked full-time for Pat Toomey as surrogate speaker for Pat, fundraiser, and also did a lot of their online media buying. So I think, we are new to this process, new to politics, and I'm pretty comfortable we'll get our message out in a short period of time here.
And just a quick follow-up, you not only switched parties, but you actually supported Joe Sestak and President Obama when he ran. And
that's a little bit inaccurate. So in 2006, I did. I supported Sestak in 2006. I was the one that fought with Pat to make sure we replaced him in 2010. When he ran in 2006, he ran as a fiscal conservative. And I will tell you, I think he was mistaken, or he misled a lot of people, myself included. I believe in redemption. Part of redemption is you fight to get rid of your mistakes. And I'm proud to say I worked hard with Pat Toomey to make sure we got rid of Joe Sestak. And I voted for John McCain in the general election of 2008. Was registered in the primary and voted for what I thought was the lesser of two evils in that primary election. So there's a lot of misinformation out there. I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to get the record straight.
Governor Corbett said last week or a couple weeks ago in a radio interview with Dom Giordano in Philadelphia that he thought you switched from Republican to Democrat in 2008 in response to a Rush Limbaugh campaign to defeat Hillary Clinton in the primary. Do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I've been very consistent on this. I think it's, and I think it's a part of the story we need as a party to win back those voters. So I've been very upfront from the very start on my rationale when I was 28 years old and why I switched parties, and also how I think that will help us build the party again by bringing back those literally hundreds of thousands of voters we lost in 2006 and 2008. I think my story, my political story, but also my life story, which really is the American dream, helping others now start their own businesses. I think that's a compelling story to bring voters back to why our values as a Republican Party matter.
We still have lots of folks that want to ask questions. Joe from Mount Pleasant, you're on the air.
Yeah, Miss. I was wondering, since Rick Santorum don't believe in separation of church and state, does he believe that churches should be taxed like everybody else in the United States?
I'm not sure the question was, so I'm not sure where Rick is on the political or on that issue. I'll tell you what, I don't know what the tax rules are. I believe churches fall under a nonprofit.
What the caller might be referring to, I don't want to put words in his mouth, was the recent controversy over the Obama administration policy under the new Health Care Act to require health insurers, regardless of the company's tax status or other status, to provide coverage for contraceptives. That may be what he's asking about.
Yeah, that is a great question. I think what's neat is, or good, is that this decision by HHS really has opened Americans' eyes up to what Obamacare is. This whole issue has nothing to do with contraceptives. This has everything to do with religious freedom. It has everything to do with economic freedom. And what we're seeing as we kind of unpeel the onion on Obamacare is we're seeing that it is a top-down approach. Washington's going to tell every company in this country, every insurance company, what has to be in their plans and what can't be in their health care plans. And that is the complete opposite direction we need to go. When I used to have a sizable company, we would every year, we'd sit down as HR and we'd map out, we'd say, all right, here's the things we want to offer in our health care plans. Sometimes, there's dental plans, there's vision plans, there's different co-pays, there's different prescription plans. And the power of the ability for us to do that as a consumer helps the marketplace. It helps people figure out what healthcare plans should be or what they want in their healthcare plans. And what you're seeing from Obamacare is a clear process in which that goes away. Everybody has to do the same. Everybody has to play by our rules. And I think that's the flaw of the system, and that's why it is bad economic policy, clearly, and it's also bad healthcare policy, because that choice is really what's ultimately going to drive down costs. What we need to do is, first of all, I think it should be on the state level, but I think you need choice. You need people to connect their dollars, vote with their dollars. That's why health savings accounts have been so effective in actually driving down costs. You're seeing a lot of things in the private practice where people are offering things outside of the insurance industry that has gone the drive down cost. So I think that this issue of the HHS really has been distorted in a lot of ways. This has nothing to do with contraceptives. This has everything to do with economic and religious freedom. And I think I'm excited to say I think it has opened Americans' eyes to the dangers of Obamacare. This is not the system we want in America. This is a system that ultimately is going to lead to higher cost and lower quality. And I refuse to accept that. America's better than that.
And just as a point of clarification, when you say Obamacare, do you mean the Affordable Care Act?
I do.
There was a bill introduced by a legislator in Arizona. This is slightly offbeat, but I guess the concern is it's the slippery slope argument. There was a bill introduced in the Arizona State Legislature that would allow employers to require any employee of theirs who has a prescription for contraceptives to show why it's needed on a medical basis. Where is the line for health insurance, given that we do provide it through our employers? Where's the line for you?
Without having seen the details of that bill, I can't comment on it. I mean, I think right now the marketplace where employers, in my first company, we offered 100% of medical. Okay, no out of pocket from the employer or employee, and then they got to choose whether they wanted dental or vision, and then we did a copay on that dental and vision. I think that ability for the employer and the employee to work together to find out what's best for them, that's the key, to make sure that they work together to figure out what's best for the employer and the employee.
Let's head back to the phones. We still have callers. Martin from Newport, welcome.
Yes, I just retired from the federal government in December, 27 years service, and my job consists of rebuilding machinery for all branches of the service. New procurement is the biggest issue is that a lot of costs can be brought down. For instance, for 18-inch galvanized pipe, half-inch, the United States government paid $850 for it. To mount it to the machine, a 3-inch square block, they paid $2,200 for it. Now, that's just a small items, but the outrageous prices, and you look at the whole defense system where everything's being made overseas, I guarantee you could save health care, Social Security. What's the accountability for people that's giving these contracts out to have things made overseas?
I think it's a good example of how Washington is failing us. That is taxpayer money that is clearly just being thrown away. I will tell you, as a senator, I will not be the guy that is at every ribbon cutting in the state. I'll be the guy rolling up my sleeves, getting involved, and understanding how we can make the government more efficient. It is time that we find people to fight to make government more efficient and have the experience. I think it's just lacking in Washington.
Try to squeeze in a few more calls. Kim from Oliphant, you're on PCN.
Hi, Steve. I was wondering, what is your stand on the Second Amendment, gun rights?
Very pro Second Amendment, very pro the Constitution. I gun owner and hunter.
With 1 minute left, let's take one last call. Anna Marie from Allentown. You get the last question.
Hi, Steve. Question about Obamacare. Would you vote to revoke and or defund Obamacare, and what would you do to put in place to help healthcare costs?
Excellent question. Absolutely vote to repeal it and defund it. I think that's a critical step to making sure this economy gets off the ground. Obamacare created so much uncertainty for employers on what employee costs were going to be for healthcare. It is clear that it's going to drive up costs. Employers know that, and that's one of the reasons so many of them are sitting on the sidelines trying to wait and see what happens with that bill. I think the sooner we get past the point at which we say this is going to get repealed, and I think that hopefully the Supreme Court will do that for us. If not, I think this next Senate and House and President will do that. But as soon as we do that, I think you'll see this economy move in the right direction. I think it's one of the key elements. What I think we need to do is we need experimentation at the states. I think you can look out there and you can see some experiments that have been done in Texas, some experiments that have been done in Utah that have really gone to drive down costs. Texas did a tort reform, a loser pays tort reform that has had huge positive impacts on driving down costs within the system. Utah did a private health exchange system that, again, increased quality and I think reduced cost as well. The key is Washington, I assure you, does not know everything, nor do I, but I assure you that if we empower American families, we empower American communities, they will come to the right decisions on what's best for them, and that will make sure that we increase our standard of living and all Americans have the opportunity to have the American dream that I've been blessed to have.
We are out of time. Steve Welch, thank you very much for being on PCN with us.
Thank you.
Animal husbandry and sport is the topic of tomorrow's PCN call-in program. Chris Herr from Penn Ag Industries Association and Paul Shapiro of the Humane Society lead the discussion and take your calls at 7 p.m. And a reminder, if you didn't get a chance to call in and comment during tonight's show, you can continue the conversation on our website at pcntv.com. I'm Corinna Wilson, and for everyone here at PCN, thanks for watching.